More days to doing nothing, no more watching from the side. There's a war between good and evil, it's time that you decide. When they got you in that crowd, do you bow or do you rise? Are you one of those who resists or who complies? No more time here for denial, no more swallowing their lies, no more fueling this monstrosity that preys on our demise. It's time we take this outside and open up our eyes, identify the strings and cut the ties.
This week marks the 10th anniversary of the government's use of the Patriot Act. This hateful law, enacted in the aftermath of 9/11 with no debate in the House of Representatives and having been read by just 2 senators before all 100 voted on it, profoundly and directly assaults the freedom of speech, the right to privacy, and the Constitution itself. First, a little history. When we were colonists and the King of England was looking for ingenious ways to tax us, his advisors came up with the Stamp Act. It required that all colonists have a stamp on every official piece of paper in their possession. Thus, one needed to go to a British government office here in the colonies and buy stamps and affix them to all financial documents, legal documents, books, business correspondence, even pamphlets and posters that you plan to hand out or nail to a tree. Question: how did the king know if you had all these stamps on all these documents in the privacy of your home? Answer: Parliament enacted the Townshend Acts. These abominable laws permitted British soldiers to write their own search warrants. Thus, it was not uncommon for soldiers to knock on the door of a home and hand the occupant a piece of paper on which they had authorized themselves to enter the home, ostensibly to look for the stamps. This was the last straw. We threatened to secede from Great Britain. Parliament rescinded the Stamp Act. We seceded anyway. The king sent soldiers here to kill our soldiers and to take us back. We fought the revolution and we won. We wrote a constitution, and to it we added the 4th Amendment. That amendment mandates that only judges may issue search warrants, and they may only do so after the government presents to them evidence under oath of the likelihood of criminal activity on the part of the person whose papers and records the government seeks. You see, the framers, when they wrote the Constitution, were sick and tired of big government. And they wrote the Constitution to assure that no American government could do to Americans what the king had done to the colonists. Fast forward to 2001, and along came the Patriot Act. Incredibly, it permits federal agents, from FBI agents to Cousin Janet's goons, to write their own search warrants, bypassing the requirements of the 4th Amendment to the Constitution. And what is equally as offensive, the same Patriot Act makes it a felony for the recipient of a search warrant to tell anyone about it. So under this law, when a federal agent hands you a self-written search warrant, you cannot tell your priest in confession, your spouse in the bedroom, your lawyer in confidence. You can't even tell a federal judge in a public courtroom that federal agents came calling. This is interesting and it's terrifying, because the colonists could tell anyone that the British soldiers came calling with their self-written search warrants. And the colonists did so often. They did it loud and they did it long. Well, we have a little good news on this front. Today's Washington Post reports that some Americans have not been taking this lying down. They're not only telling lawyers and judges that the feds have come calling, but they're actually challenging these self-written search warrants in court. In one famous case in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the FBI served a self-written search warrant on an 85-year-old volunteer librarian in her office at the public library and told her not to tell anyone about it. When she handed the warrant to her 75-year-old volunteer colleague, you can't make this stuff up, the feds pursued her for telling another person about the search warrant. On the eve of her federal trial, the federal judge in the case informed the lawyers for the government that the judge was about to declare the Patriot Act unconstitutional. Suddenly and without warning, the feds asked the court to dismiss the case against the, by then, 86-year-old librarian. Since that time, 5 different federal judges have invalidated portions of this unconstitutional law, but the feds still use it.
I will cut tens of billions of dollars in wasteful spending.
That's why I've proposed an additional $1 billion in non-military assistance each year.
I will cut investments in unproven missile defense systems. I will not weaponize space. I will slow our development of future combat systems.
We need more troops, more helicopters, more satellites, more Predator drones in the Afghan border region.
You as president say we are out of NAFTA in 6 months.
I have said that I will renegotiate NAFTA, so obviously you'd have to say to Canada and Mexico that that's exactly what we're going to do.
And I think actually Senator Clinton's answer on this one is right.
But how much of that bluster is real? CTV News has learned that within the last month, a senior member of the Barack Obama campaign telephoned the Canadian ambassador to the United States, Michael Wilson. In that call, the Obama operative warned the ambassador that NAFTA would become part of the debate in the Democratic primaries and that Obama would take some heavy swings at the trade deal, but told the ambassador, don't worry, it's just campaign rhetoric. It's not serious.
It goes to the question of truthfulness. In other words, did Barack Obama say one thing privately to a foreign government and then say something entirely different to the voters of Ohio and Texas? And it appears that tonight that's exactly what he did, and that's exactly.
In a TV ad in Pennsylvania on his energy proposals, Barack Obama says, quote, I don't take money from oil companies. The truth is, no candidate takes money from oil companies directly because it's illegal to accept donations from corporations.
A quote today from Senator Barack Obama, which puzzled me. He said that we should have sex education in kindergarten. I'm not kidding you. And I scratch my head as I hear that. Sex education in kindergarten.
I remember him using this in his campaign against me, saying Barack Obama supports teaching sex education to kindergartners. And, you know, which I didn't know what to tell him. But it's the right thing to do. But it's the right thing to do. But it's the right thing to do.
My view on FISA has always been that
this administration acts like violating civil liberties is the way to enhance our security. It is not.
the issue of the phone companies per se.
No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient.
It is a close call for me.
There are no shortcuts to protecting America.
You will not see a dime of increased taxes. Not one dime. Not your payroll tax.
The best idea, I think, is to raise the cap on the payroll tax.
Not your income tax.
Your new tax plan is going to tax me more, doesn't it?
Not your capital gains tax.
Why would you want to increase anybody's taxes right now? Why would you want to do that? Anyone in America. When we have such a tough time, when these small business people like Joe the plumber are going to create jobs, unless you take that money from him and spread the wealth around.
I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody. I think when you spread the wealth around.
His campaign tried to clean up a sizable Memorial Day gaffe about his family's role in liberating a notorious Nazi concentration camp.
I had an uncle who was one of the who was part of the first American troops to go into Auschwitz.
Obama's point dealt with the need for more mental health services for today's veterans, but it was built on false history, both about his family and World War II. First, Obama didn't have an uncle who served in the U.S. Army. Second, Russian forces liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland in January of 1945. Obama's dubious claim is inconsistent with world history and demands an explanation, the Republican National Committee said in a statement. Obama's frequent exaggerations and outright distortions raise questions about his judgment and his readiness to lead as Commander-in-Chief.
Christ into my life, I learned that my sins could be redeemed, and that if I placed my trust in Jesus, that he could set me on a path to eternal life. When I submitted myself to his will,
I can't simply point to the teachings of my church or evoke God's will.
It was that newfound faith that fortified my commitment.
Which passages of Scripture should guide our public policy? Should we go with Leviticus, which suggests slavery is okay, and that eating shellfish is an abomination? Or we could go with Deuteronomy, which suggests stoning your child if he strays from the faith, to the Sermon on the Mount, a passage that is so radical that it's doubtful that our own Defense Department would survive its application.
As the world knows, will never start a war. Leading Democratic presidential candidate Senator Barack Obama issued a warning to Pakistan today, saying
he would be prepared to order military attacks against Al-Qaeda targets inside Pakistan.
President Musharraf will not act. We will.
New questions tonight about an Army combat brigade being trained to deal with civil disturbances in the United States.
Under the provisions, would it be possible that an American citizen then could be declared an enemy combatant and sent to Guantanamo Bay and detained indefinitely?
I think that as long as that individual, no matter who they are, if they pose a threat to the security of the United States of America, should not be allowed to continue that threat.
To the police and the military, when you signed up, you took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But did you ever actually read that document? Was your oath sincere? Or were they just empty words? It's unfortunate that we would have to ask. But deep in your heart, I think you know exactly what I'm getting at. You're not stupid. You know full well that the government that you're working for has committed high treason. You know that they are criminals. You know full well that they have made themselves into enemies of the Constitution and of the people. You see what's happening, and you know where this is headed, and yet you continue to obey. So I ask you again, was your oath sincere? If so, when exactly were you planning to start honoring it? When exactly were you planning to start defending the Constitution? When everyone else is standing up? When it's popular with your colleagues and your buddies? When you can do so without risking your job security? When it's easy? Where is the honor in that? Where is the honor in doing what's right only when you're pushed by the crowd? How is that courage? This is not a rhetorical question. Was your oath to defend the Constitution sincere? The real answer is in your actions, not in your words. And either way, history will remember.
I went downstairs, I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know. He said, I said, well, did they tie Saddam to 9/11? He said, no. He said, but I guess they don't know what to do about terrorism, and so they think, but they can attack states, and they want to look strong, and so I guess they think if they take down a state, it will intimidate the terrorists. And you know, it's like that old saying, he said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem has to be a nail. Well, I walked out of there pretty upset, and then we attacked Afghanistan. I was pretty happy about that. We should have. And then I came back to the Pentagon about 6 weeks later. I saw the same officer. I said, why haven't we attacked Iraq? We still going to attack Iraq? He said, oh, sir, he says, it's worse than that. He said, he pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office. It says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years.